Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. And it is awake. The bridge of the Valkyreth was silent, save for the faint buzz of filtered air and the muted beeps of recalibrating systems. Kellis stood rigid, her gaze never leaving the forward screen where the human vessel lingered. Quiet, motionless, yet impossibly loud in presence. That single sliver of glowing light that had appeared on its forward hull had since vanished, as if it had blinked once, acknowledging their gaze, and then gone still again. But the message had already been delivered. It was no longer a question of what the vessel was. Now, it was why it existed. "Begin a full systems diagnostic," she ordered, voice low but steady. "I want to be certain our instruments aren't corrupted by whatever that pulse was." "Yes, Sub-Commander," Dren said, already moving. Even as the crew busied themselves, Kalis isolated the energy scan that had come off the ship in the moment before it shimmered, an outward breath of power that had shaken their cloaking grid loose for several heartbeats. She dragged the waveform across her display, looping it, enhancing. And there, buried in the signal, complexity. Not just energy, not just interference. A layered cascade of modulated frequencies, subtle, refined, intelligent. Whoever had built that ship hadn't just designed it to hide, they'd designed it to look back. "Commander," came a quiet voice from the aft station. "We've reprocessed the passive scans. No active pings, just reflections." Keyless turned. "And?" The analyst looked pale beneath her chiton, eyes wide. "This ship, it's over 4 kilometers long." The bridge quieted again. 4 kilometers. Keyless exhaled slowly. That was larger than a Dakari assault carrier, larger than the High Council's fleet barge. She pulled up the rendering on her terminal. The vessel was shaped like a blade, long, narrow, tapered at the ends, but thick through the middle, like a sword left embedded in the void. Its plating had no visible seams, no exposed weapons, no docking arms, no engine glow. Everything about it defied known naval architecture, human or otherwise. "What class is this?" she asked aloud. No one answered. There was no class. Kellis summoned the database of human warship designs, which had grown increasingly sophisticated over the past 2 decades. Most of their advancements had been reactionary, improvements in shielding, propulsion, countermeasures. Each one developed in response to something, never as part of a long-term doctrine. But this ship was not reactive. It was intentional. Kellis tapped the screen, marking the few readable subsystems the Valkyreth's passive scans had gathered before the ship's defense grid had shut them out. The results chilled her. Its hull was composed of an exotic multi-layer weave, a blend of high-density alloys, thermal reactive fibers, and something they couldn't identify. Beneath the outer shell were deflection membranes, designed not just to absorb impact, but to redirect it. Any energy weapon that struck it wouldn't just be neutralized, it would be mirrored. And then there were the redundant structures, triple-banked power cores, independently shielded, backup life support rings, 12 separate AIs managing discrete systems, none connected directly. If one failed or was sabotaged, the others would remain uncompromised. The ship could operate at full battle readiness with half its systems destroyed. "This isn't a ship," she muttered under her breath. "It's a fortress." "Commander," Dren said from the weapons console, his voice thin. I think we've identified armament nodes. They're... He stopped. Kellis turned toward him. Speak. He looked up, eyes haunted. They're hidden beneath the hull, behind sliding plates. We detected just 3 before the signal cut out. But if our readings are correct, they're not standard railguns. They're mounted along the spinal axis, likely spinal cannons, long-barrel linear accelerators. She frowned. What kind of velocity? Dren swallowed. Relativistic. A silence fell so heavy it pressed into her lungs. Weapons that could fire slugs at near light speed. No shielding could stop that. No armor could slow it. A single hit could split a cruiser in half before its crew even knew they were under attack. They have more, he added, voice distant now. Plasma coils, high-frequency disruptors, flak cannons, missile bays, thousands of them, hidden, all across the surface. It's not a ship designed to engage one target. It's designed to fight everyone. That matched the terrifying logic of the design. This wasn't a deterrent ship. It was a ship you used when you knew you were going to be outnumbered. Kellis sat back, claws curling around the armrest of her command chair. They built it to survive. Dren blinked. Survive what? She didn't answer. Her mind was racing. Every choice in the vessel's construction spoke of an enemy not seen in battle lines or border conflicts. This wasn't a rival empire they feared. No, the humans had built this ship like a last wall, like a bunker forged in deep space. But what war had they seen coming? She keyed in a new scan, this time attempting to locate biosigns. She expected silence. Most warships ran cold in stealth mode. But what she found made her stomach twist. There were humans aboard, dozens of them, and something else. The readings were scrambled, distorted. But even through the static, she could make out secondary life forms, denser than human averages, augmented, maybe mechanical, maybe something in between. The Valkyreth's scanners couldn't resolve them fully, but they were there. She leaned closer. Dren, pull up the records from the Etris incident. His eyes widened. You think they're using those? Kellis nodded grimly. During the Etris skirmish nearly 10 cycles ago, the Dakari had intercepted human reports of something new. Experimental shock units that combined fallen human soldiers with cybernetic weapon systems. Unkillable foot soldiers, more machine than flesh, designed to be dropped onto enemy ships during boarding operations. Rumors had called them wraiths in armor. I think they've perfected them, Kellis said, voice low. And they're inside that ship. She sat back, her thoughts spinning faster now. This ship, this thing, was a message. It had been placed here on purpose, away from human space. Left exposed, but not unprotected. It was bait, not for them. Not for the Dakari. For something else. A threat only the humans had seen. Kellis rose to her feet and looked out across the void. Whatever was coming, the humans were no longer trying to warn anyone. They were preparing alone. And that ship was the first shot of a war no one else even knew had begun. Kellis had never felt more exposed. The Valkyreth was a speck of glass drifting in the shadow of a mountain. Her stealth systems, once the pride of the Dakari observation fleet, felt like scraps of cloth trying to muffle a scream. Across the void, the human warship loomed in absolute silence, its presence warping every sense of scale and certainty. But silence was no longer safety. The moment the eye had opened, brief and deliberate, something fundamental had shifted. It hadn't been an accident. It had been a signal. The kind a predator gives not before attacking, but before speaking. Kellis's fingers hovered over the comms panel. Was she about to make first contact or trigger a response they wouldn't survive? Sub-Commander, Drin whispered. The ship is emitting again. Very low band. Audio compression. Tight beam. Directed at us. She turned sharply. Play it. He nodded, fingers flying over the console. At first, there was only static. Then, layered beneath it, a low tone began to rise. Mechanical, deliberate. And then a voice, sharp and cold, cut through the sound. Unidentified vessel, it said. The words were in Galactic Standard, but spoken with a distinctly human cadence. Gravel-edged, calm, absolute. You are in proximity to an active Terran War asset. State your affiliation and purpose. A single sentence. But the intent beneath it struck harder than any weapon. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. The bridge crew looked to Kellis. Her mouth had gone dry. A Terran War asset. That meant Terran Union, humanity's centralized military authority. But there was no mention of cooperation, no request for communication, just presence, ownership, and a sharp implication. You've been seen. Now prove you belong here. She swallowed. Prepare a response. Civil diplomatic tone. Use standard syntax. Make no sudden movements. No encryption. Her voice faltered for just a moment, but she pressed on. This is Sub-Commander Keyless of the Dakari Observation Wing, she said, keeping her tone neutral. We were conducting a passive scan of regional space. No hostile intent. We request communication clearance. Dren sent the message. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then the human voice returned. Still calm, but now tinged with something else. Dry. Amused. Observation? Interesting word for cloaked surveillance. We've had eyes on your vessel for 22 minutes. You're not exactly subtle. A shiver went through the bridge. The Valkyreth had been cloaked the entire time. From the moment they arrived, humans shouldn't have seen them. No species had cracked Dakari stealth, not even the Zenth. And yet here they were, exposed. I advise you, the voice continued, to redirect your curiosity. Further intrusion into this sector will be treated as an act of intent. The line cut. That was the end of the message. No bluster. No threat of force. Just a fact. Leave or else. Kellis stared at the now blank screen. Her hands had gone still at her sides. Every instinct screamed to power up the engines, turn and run for open space. But she didn't. Not yet. Because something was wrong. It wasn't the way the human spoke. It was what he hadn't said. Kellis was trained to hear subtext in all diplomatic communications. And what she heard in that voice wasn't anger. It was warning. She turned to Dren. Was there a visible transmission source? He frowned. Negative. We couldn't triangulate the origin. It might have come from anywhere aboard the vessel, possibly routed through multiple relays. Kellis exhaled through her teeth. They don't want us to know where the command center is. She stood slowly and moved to the viewport. The ship still hadn't moved. Still hadn't raised weapons, still hadn't powered its main drive. Yet its mere presence had destabilized an entire Dakari fleet wing. "Commander," one of her comms officers said cautiously, "we're receiving a secondary signal. Low-frequency carrier. Non-verbal." Kellis turned. The officer swallowed. It's a targeting lattice." The room went still again. "They've painted us with fire control," Dren said grimly. "Multiple solution paths. They're calculating possible evasion trajectories." Keyless stepped forward to the console and examined the data. The human ship had locked its primary weapon systems onto Valkareth's position, but not as a threat, as a probability map. Each targeting line wasn't a bullseye. It was a possibility, a counter to what they might do next. If they moved left, boom. If they jumped, boom. If they ran, boom. "They're giving us a chance to behave," Keyless whispered. "A single mistake and we're ash." "We should leave," Dren said, his voice hardening. "Now. Before that ship decides it's not worth the effort to tolerate us." But Keyless shook her head. Not yet. Every part of her military training said to flee, but every part of her intuition said this encounter was bigger than fear, bigger than risk. She focused on the last burst of the signal. The pattern was familiar, standard Union firing geometry. But the code packet at the end, that was different. She scanned it again and caught something odd. There was a delay. A purposeful microsecond of hesitation before the lock engaged. Not enough to be a glitch, just enough to be noticed by someone looking closely. She looked to Dren. "They let us see it." "What?" She nodded. "The targeting lattice. They didn't mask it, didn't encrypt it. They wanted us to know they had us, and that they weren't pulling the trigger." "Why?" She looked back toward the warship and felt the answer settle in her chest like a weight. "Because this isn't a territory defense," she said. "This isn't about us at all. They're not protecting a border. They're standing watch." The others fell silent. Kellis took a slow breath. "They're expecting something." She didn't say it aloud, but the thought burned in her skull. Something worse than us. Something worth building a monster for. The comms pinged again. Another signal. This one came with a marker, a narrowband handshake, diplomatic access level flagged in red. Not a declaration. Not an ultimatum. An invitation. Dren turned slowly. "They want to speak." Keyless narrowed her eyes. The Indomitable, for that had to be its name, based on old whispers and scattered logs, wasn't finished with them yet. And now it was opening the door. The bridge of the Valkareth was silent as the diplomatic channel blinked gently on the forward display. A soft, pulsing indicator of permission granted. Not demanded, not negotiated. Given. Kellis stared at it, her eyes narrowed. In all her years studying human behavior, she'd seen them operate in bluster, in arrogance, in desperation. They were many things, but subtle wasn't one of them. And yet here was subtlety. Controlled. Deliberate. Calculated. "Open the channel," she said finally. "Audio only." The comms officer hesitated, then obeyed. A faint chime echoed through the bridge, and then once more, the voice returned. "This is Captain Elias Grant, commanding officer of the Indomitable. I assume you have questions." The tone was unchanged. calm, not hostile, but not friendly either, like someone who had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times and had long since stopped caring about the outcome. Kellis stepped forward. Captain Grant, I am Subcommander Kellis of the Dakari Observation Wing. Your vessel was not in any known registry, nor is it in any known sector of sanctioned human space. Correct, came the reply. That's because this isn't sanctioned space, and this ship was never built for your records. Kellis hesitated. You allowed us to detect you, even invited us to speak. Why? Grant's pause was long enough to suggest contemplation, but short enough to prove confidence. Because we're running out of time. There was something in the way he said it. An undertone of exhaustion, of burden. You scanned us, Grant continued. You've seen what Indomitable is. You've seen what it can do. That was intentional. We wanted you to see. Not because we fear your report, but because your kind might be smart enough to understand what comes next. Kellis glanced toward her crew, then returned her gaze to the speaker. What comes next? Another pause. Then a click. The forward screen lit up, not with weapons, not with schematics, but with data. Clean, structured, layers of encoded files, classified frequencies, encrypted packets. The systems aboard the Valkyreth recognized none of it, except one part. A signature buried deep in the feed. A pulse format used in Dakari emergency relay buoys. It had no reason being inside a human file, but it was there. You've intercepted one of our transmissions, Kellis said quietly. How? Grant didn't answer directly. We didn't build this ship for war with the Dakari, or the Zenth, or the Union. We didn't build it to dominate the stars. We built it because something is coming. Kellis's stomach turned. There it was. The unspoken suspicion she'd been carrying since the moment she'd first laid eyes on the ship. What kind of something? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try. Another silence. Then the audio shifted, crackled, and began playing a sound. At first, it was just static. Then the signal cleared, and her entire crew turned toward the speakers as one. It was a scream. Not human, not mechanical, something deep and guttural, like a void wind being dragged through metal. It warbled, echoed, grew in volume. It wasn't rage, it wasn't pain, it was hunger. The recording cut out. That, Grant said, voice now flat, is what we encountered on the edge of explored space, 80 years ago. A derelict ship, drifting in what we thought was an unclaimed sector. At first, we thought it was an artifact. Ancient, long dead. Then it moved. He paused, and it wasn't alone. Kellis found herself gripping the edge of the console. You've encountered them again? She asked. We haven't stopped, Grant said. They don't broadcast. They don't talk. They don't respond. They consume. They attack, and they adapt. Adapt? Our first contact was a disaster. They ignored our shields, cracked our armor. Our weapons barely scratched them. By the time we pulled back, we'd lost 2 battle groups and a science station. He sounded tired, not just emotionally, spiritually. We called them the Erebus, he said. We don't know what they call themselves, if they even have names. But they left us with a message. What kind of message? They didn't kill everyone. They let a single escape pod go, a single survivor. She drifted for 6 days in the wreckage. Her logs are what we based the Indomitable on. Kellis stood still. The bridge had gone so quiet that she could hear the static hum of the relay uplink. "You think they're coming here?" she asked. "No," Grant said. "We know they are." He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. The data feed continued uploading into the Valkyreth systems: long-range sensor data, wreckage reports, energy readings, communications from distant colonies that had gone silent without explanation, and satellite footage, poorly lit, fragmented, but enough to make her gut twist. There were things moving inside the debris, not ships, not creatures. Things that blurred the line, metal shaped like bone, flesh fused with circuitry, great wings of jagged light unfolding across space. A war was coming. Not a war for territory or pride. A war for survival. "Why didn't you warn the Union?" Kellis asked finally. "We tried," Grant replied. "They ignored us. Said we were manufacturing a threat to consolidate military power. Said it was human fear-mongering." "They wouldn't believe you." "They never do. So we stopped asking. We started building." Kellis's eyes fell on the Indomitable again. She understood it now, not just as a weapon, but as a statement. We will not go quietly. She stared into the darkness beyond the great ship's form. "And what do you want from us now?" she asked. "Help? Alliance?" "No," Grant said. "We want you to leave. Go back to your council. Tell them what you saw. Prepare, or don't. But don't get in our way." Keyless stiffened. "That sounds like a threat." "It's not," Grant said. "It's advice. You've seen our ship. You've seen what we've done in secret. Imagine what we're building that you haven't seen." Then the voice softened, just a little. "But we don't want a war with you. We want to survive the one that's coming." The channel went dead. Keyless stood there for a long moment. Then she turned to her crew. "Set a course. Return to Dakari Command. Secure channel. No interruptions." "Yes, Commander." As the Valkyreth turned away, the Indomitable remained still. Watching. Waiting. It wasn't done. Neither was she. The Valkyreth emerged from slipspace above Dakari Prime, beneath a sky of fractured starlight and drifting orbital rings. The capital planet shimmered below, a sphere of radiant blues and swirling greens, home to a civilization that prided itself on intelligence, precision, and above all, control. But as Keyless watched the glow of home approach, she felt no comfort, only dread. She stood alone in the command chamber, arms folded tight as the encrypted package from the Indomitable continued to stream through the ship's core. Every second brought more data: battle records, intercepted logs, sensor scans, high-level human communications. It was a mountain of evidence, and at its heart was a message. The Erebus are coming. Prepare or perish. "Signal the High Council," Kellis said quietly. "Summon a war quorum. This can't wait." The officer beside her glanced back nervously. The council doesn't convene war discussions outside the scheduled cycle. Kellis's voice dropped, sharp as a blade. "If they don't meet now, there won't be another cycle to plan for." The message was sent, and within the hour, she stood beneath the vaulted obsidian archways of the Dakari Conclave, the chamber of the highest minds of her people. Arrayed in a crescent before her were the 12 prime voices, their eyes unreadable, their expressions cool. Kellis projected the data. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't plead. She simply told them what she saw. The ship, the captain, the voice, the scream in the static, and the war that humanity had been preparing for in the shadows. When she finished, the chamber fell into a stillness that felt like the breath before a thunderclap. Prime voice. Telier, the eldest, finally spoke. This intelligence is staggering, but unconfirmed. Kellis clenched her jaw. You think I fabricated it? I think you were shown it. That's not the same thing. Another voice leaned forward. What if it's manipulation? An elaborate human ruse to frighten us into retreating from contested sectors? Then why not attack us? Keyless snapped. They had us locked. Their targeting lattice accounted for every move we could have made. We would have been vapor in seconds. They let us go, she said, her voice softening, because they didn't want to fight us, because they're focused on something far more dangerous. A pause. Then, Voice Tenlar tapped his clawed fingers slowly against the armrest. Let's assume the Erebus are real. What do you propose? Kellis hesitated. I propose we do what we've never done before, she said. We trust them. Silence. Then a scoff from one of the voices. Trust humanity? You ask too much, Sub-Commander. No, she replied. I ask just enough. Enough to survive. The council dismissed her with non-committal murmurs and veiled diplomacy. No vote was cast. No alliance formed. And that night, from the viewing spire above the conclave, Kellis watched as her report was buried beneath layers of political protocol. They wouldn't act. Not yet. Not until it was too late. 3 months later, the stars screamed. The first attack didn't come near Dakari space. It came in the far reach, where no known civilization had ever settled. A human outpost was vaporized in a single burst of anomalous energy. The station's emergency buoy transmitted a single visual before it was cut off. A vessel the size of a moon, shaped like a living wound, dripping void matter from its jagged hull. Swarms of smaller constructs circled it, like parasites clinging to a leviathan's skin. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't broadcast a warning. They simply arrived. And then they devoured. Whole fleets vanished in hours. Worlds went dark. Outposts were silenced before they even sent distress. Humanity retaliated. The Indomitable was among the first to engage, leading a strike fleet into what was left of the far reach. It returned alone. Its hull was cracked, scorched, but intact. Captain Grant's final transmission was brief. They're not just machines. They're not just organisms. There's something else, something worse. We slowed them down, but it won't be enough. We need them all. Every species, every fleet, or none of us survive. The message rippled through the Galactic Union like a quake beneath the foundation of civilization. This time, the Dakari listened. So did the Zenth and the Alari. Even the hyper-isolated Osari sent ships. For the first time in recorded history, the species of the galaxy formed a united command. And at the center of the Great War Assembly, standing side by side, were Sub-Commander Kellis and Captain Elias Grant. He looked older now, not in his face, but in his eyes. The kind of age that comes from seeing too many endings. She asked him, as they walked the steel bridge of the new Union flagship, "Do you think we're ready?" Grant didn't look at her. He looked out through the viewport toward the stars, where the Erebus swarms were already blotting out light like a wave of oblivion. "No," he said, "but we don't have to be ready." He turned to her. "We just have to hold the line." And when the void split open once more, when the sky cracked and the darkness poured through, it wasn't just humanity that roared back.